Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. If you want to subscribe, click on the subscribe button here in the lower right, and also the notification bell in the far upper right to be notified when new episodes are released. Today's conversation is about linking critical race theory to the statue destruction of Confederate statues. It really all goes back to Marxism. Karl Marx, developed the theory of Marxism in the 19th century. He anticipated that it would be picked up by industrial countries, but the first place that really picked it up was Russia, which then transformed into the Soviet Union. By the 1930s, it was evident that communism, Marxism, was not taking off in the industrial countries as Marx had predicted. So there was a new school of sociologists in Frankfurt, Germany, called the Frankfurt School, which developed what they call critical theory. What they were trying to address is, why isn't communism taking off in the industrial countries as predicted by Marx? Well, what they decided is that there was too much prosperity in those countries. And as a result, what was necessary was to teach the proletariat, the workers, that they were victims. They had to be taught that they were victims because they didn't immediately see it owing to the prosperity in the countries where they were working. But if the critical theory professors could gain sway, they could convince the workers that they were being taken advantage of by the capitalists. And that's the whole theory of, that's the whole point of Marxism. Convince the workers that they are exploited and that the capitalists are the ones that are exploiting them, and create that division. To do that, to convince the people in the prosperous countries, whether it be Germany, France, or what have you, they had to go back into the history of those countries and rewrite the history. They had to rewrite the history in such a way as that it was really always a conflict between the the working economic classes and the capitalists. That conflict was always there, and that's what drove the history. And that the heroes of the past, especially if they were prosperous capitalists, they had to be torn down, and new heroes on the worker side had to be picked up. So this happened during the 1930s, during the Great Depression. But then when World War II came along, a lot of these guys, they left Germany for good reason. Some of them were Jewish, and nothing wrong with that, but they came to the United States to get away from the anti-Semitism in Germany. And when they got here in the United States, they peddled the same story. You know, the United States needed to educate the workers so that the workers would understand that they were victims and that their oppressors were the capitalists. That was the whole point of it. But again, especially after World War II, when the United States went on to about 10 or 20 years of pretty good prosperity, it was hard to convince people, the workers, of this point of view. Therefore, what happened is during the 1960s and during the 1970s, instead of making the lines of cleavage be economic, a number of pioneers, if you want to call them that, so let's make the cleavage racial. Let's rewrite the history in such a way as that we can document that the real victims of the past were not necessarily the proletariat workers, it was the blacks and I guess other ethnic minorities that were taken advantage of by the whites and the capitalists in combination. So critical theory from the 1930s in Germany developed a new branch, and that new branch was critical race theory, which really started to become effective in the 1970s. It really started out as what they called critical legal studies, and critical legal studies had as its premise that the United States whole judicial system in the United States was set up in order to benefit the white man. And that if you were not a white man, then you were a victim of this biased judicial system. That meant that blacks were victims, and as you might guess, yes, women are victims, even though they are not a minority. And that's a big point of the whole issue here, is that if blacks and ethnic minorities can be combined with women, you've got a powerful political party here. That's essentially what the Democrat Party is right now. That's essentially what it is. And of course, the bogeyman is the white man. Now, how this enters into Confederate monuments is the rewriting of the history. In order to rewrite the history, the heroes of the past, if they do not conform to the victims categories, if they do not fit in the victims categories, the heroes of the past have to be destroyed. And the most, I guess one of the most obvious places to start was the Confederate leaders. And that, as we know, probably really got started with true force in 2015 after Dylan Roof murdered a number of, I don't know, 10 or so blacks at the church in Charleston, South Carolina. Maybe it was more, I'm not quite sure. But nonetheless, that's what triggered it. And then, of course, Nikki Haley, she jumped on the bandwagon of, well, let's just demonize everything with the Confederacy. And she was the Republican governor of South Carolina at the time. And she didn't give any thought to really what was going on here, as unfortunately most Americans didn't. They didn't recognize that the purpose of critical race theory was to tear down, deconstruct the history of the United States as it really was, and reconstruct it as a model that was essentially built by a conflict, a constant conflict between the oppressor classes, blacks, other racial minorities, other ethnic minorities, and women, and white men on the other side. That really went a long way, and they ran with that ball a long way. Now, only recently have we begun to see some changes in the other direction, as for example, the new governor in Virginia and the recall of 3 members of the San Francisco school board. So those signs are encouraging. Now, there's a good article if you're interested in Washington and Lee University. One of the students who's a senior this year, his name is Ian McLeod. He wrote a good article for the student newspaper, The Spectator, about critical race theory and its impact on icons, not just Confederate icons, but including Confederate icons as we know them, and pretty much saying what I said. And also there's another student in there who is, I think, a sophomore, Kevin Spivey, who wrote a good article about some of the male students at Washington College, as it was known during the Civil War, who volunteered for the Confederacy and lost their lives for the Confederacy. That has all been torn down. Now, the key thing I want to mention about this is that under the administration of Will Dudley, the president of Washington and Lee University, everything connected with Lee almost is being sanitized, and it's being sanitized by removing it. Those articles in the Spectator from Washington and Lee University, I think, are going to help you understand that. But if you really want to, it's hard to get good analysis of the Civil War and Reconstruction. That's why I want to bring to your attention a book that I think you might like, The Confederacy at Flood Tide. I wrote it. It's about the period from June of 1862 to December of 1862, when the Confederacy came closest to winning its independence. The book is $26. It's $29 at Amazon. $32 if you want an autographed copy from me. If you want an autographed copy from me, then you need to email me, Phil_Leigh, Leigh at me.com. Okay, that's our show for today. And before I sign off, if you like these videos, and I appreciate what you're doing for me, because you've recently took me over the threshold of 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you for that. And I welcome you as part of the mission here to correct the demonization of the Confederate soldier and the antebellum Southerner and the Reconstruction era Southerner that we're getting out of academia, the media, and everywhere else. Thank you for joining me in that mission. If you'd like to help more, you can go buy my books, and if you like them, please give them 5-star ratings at Amazon's and Barnes & Noble. Okay, that's my message for today, and thanks for watching.